This podcast is a quest for well-being, a quest for a meaningful life through the exploration of fundamental truth. Enlightening ideas, insights on physical, mental, and spiritual health. The inspiration is love. The aspiration is to awaken new ways of thinking that can lead us to a new way of being well. Welcome to Body, Mind, and Soul Healing Conversations.
No matter how confused, self-doubting, or ambivalent we are about what's happening in our interactions with other people, we can never entirely silence the inner voice that always tells us the truth. We may not like the sound of the truth, and we often let it murmur just outside our consciousness, not stopping long enough to listen. But when we pay attention to it, it leads us towards wisdom, health, and clarity. That voice is the guardian of our integrity. Susan Forward, Ph.D. Valeria interviews Rhonda Van De Geest. She is a certified and accredited Narcissistic Abuse Specialist, Somatic Trauma Informed Coach, PreKure Mental Health Coach, and trained practitioner of Living Wisdom Pastoral Therapy and Brainspotting. Rhonda is the founder of Victory Overwhelming, a mental wellness coaching service, which takes a holistic approach to helping people free themselves from the effects of narcissistic abuse and intergenerational trauma. Rhonda's passion is to help people gain victory over their overwhelming emotions caused by narcissism, trauma, and spiritual abuse. Rhonda coaches clients to help them regain the 4 fundamental emotional needs which trauma destroys: their sense of safety, significance, purpose, and innocence. Freedom from guilt and shame. She combines the latest brain-body neuroscience, Brainspotting, internal family systems, ACT, and pastoral therapy for somatic belief reprogramming to help clients gain awareness of and learn to overcome the barriers preventing them from living a more fulfilling life. Her unique combination of skills fills a gap in the existing mental health system, helping clients for whom traditional talk therapies have not provided the desired outcomes. Healing occurs in the body, mind, and soul. Whether you need a one-off consultation or ongoing support, it's important to get support from someone who not only has personal understanding of severe trauma, but has overcome it to experience post-traumatic growth. Rhonda helps people all over the world via online and in-person coaching. Contact Rhonda to explore how you can best work together to meet your needs. Meet Rhonda at victoryoverwhelming.com. Here's the interview with Rhonda Van De Geest.
In your own words, who is Rhonda Van De Geest?
I'm a certified trauma-informed mental health coach who specializes in narcissistic abuse. I'm a person who's healed from the physical and emotional effects of severe mental abuse. In fact, my healing came not from consulting psychiatrists or counselors or even self-help books. It really came from experiencing the supernatural healing power of the living word, the Holy Bible. And yet in saying that, I'm a Christian who's fully aware that faith in God isn't some magic wand that'll fix all our problems. That's why I explain how trust combined with faith in Christ can provide the unmet fundamental emotional needs in the same way that mental health science is only just starting to really find solutions to. My purpose is to walk alongside and guide clients as they learn to overcome their overwhelming emotions and find their own purpose in life. I've got a special interest in helping clients who've suffered childhood trauma, narcissistic abuse, or who are struggling to break free from trauma bond. I am a living testimony that Christ not only heals, he can restore the mind, body, and the soul. For clients that are suffering from trauma bond, I hope to bring awareness of the barriers blocking them from connecting to that inner voice that's trying to lead them back towards clarity, health, and wisdom.
Yes. Gosh, what's not to love about that? Yes, beautiful. So I guess to begin with, it's something that some people don't know, like some do, the definition of trauma bond. So what is trauma bond, and what are the signs that we have one?
Well, trauma bond is really a form of grief characterized by the unwillingness to let go, to lose, or to feel the pain of change, which can cause a person to keep hanging on when it's no longer healthy to do so. Some people will describe it as a form of addiction, where the person, object, or the event becomes the all-absorbing focus or the source of meaning and the sole reason for living. And then everything the victim does revolves increasingly around that object of desire. And in this way, the addiction becomes an idol or a god to which the addict is completely subjected. It's also a form of denial, because denial is the number one survival kit of the trauma-bonded person. It's actually our brain's subconscious defense mechanism, which it uses to keep pain and fear under control.
Wow. Gosh, that sounds so sad, right? That we create all these mechanisms to not see the truth or not face the truth. It's incredible to me how painful it is sometimes for some of us to be truthful to ourselves.
Yeah.
So trauma bond, addiction, that really makes sense to me. And the signs, so it's really not being able, and does automatically having the trauma bond constitute kind of abuse? Do we put ourselves into abusive relationship automatically when it's originated from trauma bond, Rhonda?
Well, it really comes from a thing called imprinting. Prior to any abuse occurring, the sufferer and the narcissist, if you like, or the abuser, they develop a strong bond either based on love and safety, as between a parent and child or adult partners, or authority and respect, such as between employer and employee, or maybe a pastor and a member of the congregation. And then in narcissistic abuse, I guess you'd say that trauma bond occurs as a result of a malevolent pattern of behavior where a person can project their own thoughts and feelings onto the victim that they wish to control. And they do this first by weakening their victim, really by flooding them with negative emotions to create fear and anxiety. And in narcissism, this is achieved by combining a combination really of devaluing mental, emotional, or physical, or even financial abuse. They may isolate the victim, gaslight them with lies, certainly betrayal or coercive control and manipulation. And this is always interspersed with periods of calm, either through reward or intimacy. And that actually works to intensify the fear, because when the next attack comes, the victim's already in a heightened state of anxiety from the previous attack. And with narcissistic abuse and trauma bond, there's a final discard when they've found a new supply. But the problem is the victim may continue to struggle with trauma bond for a long time after the relationship's ended because of that, the way that this pattern of abuse works on a person's physiological, neurological system.
Right. Wow. And this seems to be very common these days. I don't know about these days, maybe has been around for a long time, but really discussed, right? We didn't have a language. So is that something that, do you feel that's increasing? This revelation that so many people are in relationships that are with narcissistic abuse, or that they are, these people becoming more aware that they are narcissists. Is that something that you see happening, or narcissists don't really know or want to know that they have an abuse?
Well, you raise a really good point, actually, Valeria, because more and more people are talking about it today. It's very common, whereas 10 years ago, it actually wasn't very common at all. And from my personal experience, I had no idea about narcissistic abuse until after the event. The problem is we all have narcissistic traits. It's just our own human condition, which is flawed. Right. So all of us are guilty, if you like, of to some extent of having and being like a narcissist. The problem today is that everyone is labeling everyone else as a narcissist because that's a way of blame shifting and avoiding having to look, within as to, well, how might I have contributed to a situation? Right. What a lot of people don't understand is that true narcissistic abuse is definitely this pattern of creating, real fear in a person, interspersed with periods of calm, and also at the same time, breaking down a person's spirit and will to live by devaluing them. The way I would separate it separately and differently from the DSM-5, which is this general way psychiatrists tend to diagnose a person with narcissistic personality disorder, is actually, does it have the following elements? Is there intentional inflict of emotional distress? So for somebody to really have that personality disorder, they actually know what they're doing. They're actually doing it intentionally. It's you could prove that it's above and beyond what the general population would consider morally reasonable and fair. And it actually is having not only a physiological impact on an individual, but impacting their soul, if you like, and their spirit, that will to live. It's creating very severe wounds, which a person will carry throughout their life unless they manage to get help.
Right. Wow. Gosh, it's sometimes it's hard to believe with the rational mind that somebody would actually have the intention, right, to hurt others, and keep doing it. That's I have a hard time kind of wrapping my rational mind around this type of thing. It just doesn't make sense at all. But speaking of making sense, how do you make sense of suffering in general? Why do you think we, all of us as humans, we suffer so much, and some more than others, and sometimes unnecessarily? Is there a purpose to suffering and meaning?
I think the really interesting thing here is that there's a false assumption out there in the world that life should be easy. Life should be fair. I shouldn't have to suffer.
Right.
But the reality is that we're actually all on a journey. And it's almost like the purpose of this journey is to connect with and find that source of healing where there is no suffering. And in the suffering, we are being shaped every day by our choices. Either shaped for good or shaped for evil, if you like, depending on how we choose to interpret what's happened to our life and how we respond, more importantly.
Right. Yes. So you're speaking of free will, that we do have free will to choose.
Yes.
I have heard that we do. I used not to believe in free will either, because there's this big picture of life that everything is God, or everything's made of God, or everything is a creation of God. So there's nothing really that's working independent from God, per se. Everything's interconnected, and there's just kind of God in different forms. Yeah. That was one understanding. Then kind of went back to this kind of as I'm revising this idea of free will. And then I heard the other day somebody say that we do have free will to a certain extent, and then it's the will of God. Then there's nothing that can be done. Maybe that has to do with what are you saying about creating, let's say, the effect of good and bad, per se, good and evil. Yeah. So that might be the law of karma. I heard that too. That makes sense, cause and effect. So we do something, we get that. And that makes a lot of sense, Rhonda, that, in the world of, in the reality of God, that this would have to be implemented, this part of cause and effect. So we wouldn't operate under this almost like a reality that's robotic, right? Everything's predetermined.
Yes, absolutely.
That makes sense. That'll be freedom.
If we didn't have free will, it wouldn't be true love. So the story is, of course, and the truth, the reality is that we were all lovingly and perfectly made to be in relationship with our Creator. And that's why we get that sense. We can feel our attachment and our drawing to nature and creation. We have a bond with it. However, because fallen angels, if you like, came in and sin entered the world, which actually was caused a disconnect between our nervous system, which is always working to keep us safe, and our logical mind. We don't always naturally choose to love our Creator. In fact, we choose to love ourselves, which is what the fallen angels did.
Gosh. Yeah, you see, that also resonates. And let's say I studied everything. I was born Catholic, and then I'm very curious. So I studied Buddhism, Zen, Tibetan, and then some part of Sufi too, the sect of Islam. And then now it's Advaita Vedanta, which is a Hindu spiritual philosophy. I don't know if you're familiar with. A lot of people don't.
Not that one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating how it's a very ancient also spiritual philosophy that just recently, because I read the books, 3 books, they're like, I wouldn't say like similar to the Bible, it's just books that they follow. The Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, and the Brahma Sutra. So reading the Bhagavad Gita, there's one, chapter 16, it talks about that. And it's fascinating how it's Krishna, which is kind of the embodiment, let's say, like the Jesus type of the Hindus. They say things like, he said something like that they are humans or souls that have decided to choose something different, and they have embodied this demonic. They say even that word, and all the other chapters they never talk. Christian doesn't talk about that, but this one in particular, he describes the personality very similar to a narcissist, the narcissistic personality disorder or traits. Isn't that interesting? Very similar.
It's incredible. So there's 2 things I want to say to that. One is that you and I have been on a very similar journey. I was raised as a Catholic and moved away from it in my teenage years. When I traveled, and particularly in Central America, through Mexico and the like, I remember coming back after that and saying to my father, well, I don't believe in religion anymore, because I saw all this poverty right next to gold-gilded churches and heard all the stories of how Catholic missionaries had murdered all these people just because they wouldn't convert. So I don't believe in that. I believe in spirituality. And so I went on a journey, and I guess I decided when my first child was born, I bought 2 books on world religions, and I was going to teach them the very best of all the world religions. And I read these books, and all it did was make me confused, very confused. So then I thought, well, that's all right. I'm connected to nature. I believe in Mother Nature. Now, this was around the time the narcissistic abuse started in my first marriage. And I would go for a walk or a run, and I'd connect to nature, and I would really feel that healing power. But it was never sustainable, because when I went back home, or when something inevitably happened that got me triggered, I would lose it. Right. And it wasn't until a good 10 years later, where we'd moved homes, we'd actually moved countries back to New Zealand, and I was surrounded by Christians. And we'd go on, weekends away with the girls, and they would try and convert me coming back. And I'd say, look, I am a Christian. I, believe in God. This is a friendship breaker if you're going to try and shove your religion down my throat. But inevitably, because my situation became, and the abuse became so severe, there was the day the penny dropped was the day I saw my narcissist's eyes turn black. And I realized it was abuse, even though it was only usually mental and emotional, bordering on physical. I saw and I recognized this darkness. The other thing that I'd say now is that what I know now is that the abuse is spiritual. And I can prove that because during the COVID lockdowns, I was Googling, as we do, and I came across a thing called menticide. Now, menticide is a term. Are you familiar with it? Have you heard it?
No.
Okay.
No.
So an Austrian psychologist called Just Müller wanted to study Hitler and the Nazi regime because he thought, I wonder how Hitler managed to brainwash all those good Germans. Remember, a lot of them were religious.
Yeah.
How did he brainwash them into doing all the autocracies of the Holocaust? Yeah. And what he discovered is this, that throughout history, totalitarian governments and regimes used the same pattern of abuse and propaganda to break down the minds of the victim and control the populace. And this is the pattern they used. They would use propaganda in waves. So, for instance, let's say, there's COVID. It's going to kill millions of people around the world. It's terrible. It's terrible. Oh, it's okay. We think we've got it under control. Oh, no, now there's another variant, and it's even worse than before. Even more people are going to die. What that does, by putting it in waves interspersed with periods of calm, it drives the level of adrenaline and cortisol up in people's bodies up, causing anxiety and fear.
Right.
Okay, but because it's always interspersed with periods of calm, dopamine, the addiction hormone, comes in because we are actually becoming addicted to the reward, to the holding on for the good stuff that's going to happen. Right. But then when the next wave of propaganda and fear-inducing behavior comes, we've already got an elevated level of cortisol and adrenaline, or the stress response, in our nervous system. So eventually, over time, as this pattern progresses, we become more and more and more anxious and more less able to break it. But at the same time as the propaganda, they're doing other things to break down the person's spirit, to break down their morale, okay, by saying, well, you can't go out on your paddleboard, you can't talk to your neighbours, we're going to lock you up. And this is how they break down a person and make them controllable. And he nicknamed it rape of the mind and the soul. And I thought, oh my God, that's the same pattern of narcissistic abuse my ex performed on me. And yet my ex didn't know what menticide was. He certainly didn't know what narcissism was. Right. How did he know to do that pattern? Right. It's got to be spiritual. And so what I did is I Googled images of menticide on the internet. And what I came up with, the images were just purely satanic. Wow. Satanic. And I thought, yes, this is a spirit. Yeah. And if you ever read the Bible and you read 2 Timothy 3, it explains a narcissist perfectly. What, it says in end times, men will be lovers of themselves, vain, conceited, knowing, having a knowledge of the truth, but not living it, etc., etc. And that, it will, weak-willed woman, it did call out woman, although obviously men can be victims as well, don't give heed to any of these people, don't associate with them because they'll suck you in. And it really is, that's the truth of the matter. We're fighting a spiritual force. And when you say, we are not of this world, it's very true. When you know that you rely on Christ to give you your energy, your source of wisdom, and to guide you, you're not of this world anymore. You've, your focus is to the heavens. It is not. We're not looking to this world, and the problems that we face are that we actually, as humans, because we're designed to be in relationship, we look to other people to give us a sense of security significance, innocence, and purpose. And when they fail us, we might even look to things, objects. We might look to groups to give us that. But the problem is, because we're all flawed, we can't actually ever fill the love cup of our hearts the way Christ can.
Yes. And what's not to love about that as the solution for the problem? That's a beautiful path, though. That's one that I can't help it, but it's the only one I see. It's not even the solution. That's it's the truth. It's really truth. It's just returning to it. Not that that the truth left us. We left the truth in a way, some of us, with our minds. So that makes a lot of sense. That I have here highlighted in red the part you wrote an article. Let me just mention the article today you sent to me. It's a PDF. It's an ebook, really. It says Breaking Denial for Trauma-Bonded Victims of Narcissistic Abuse. So that's the title. And then later on in that ebook, you say, breaking trauma bond to a narcissist is not about forcibly cutting ties to the abuser. Rather, it is a spiritual battle. So I highlighted that because it just resonated intuitively without even kind of rationalizing it. So I would like to hear a little bit more about that. The explanation you gave, it's very clear, and it also resonates with me that there's truth there. But when it comes to this spiritual battle, because we need more than one person, right, to become a war. So what have we done to attract that? I'm just wondering, I think my mother had these traits too. She was very abusive. And then I married men that they were the same. And that was interesting. So is that something that we have to address ourselves, Rhonda, as our own in our own spiritual journeys? Or, I'm wondering, what's happening there?
Well, absolutely. I did hear a false assumption there, though, that you said, what have I done to attract that?
Right. So, okay, let me drop that.
I don't think it's any individual personally. It is just, we particularly with a trauma-bonded person, we tend to become driven by our internal reality, because the amygdala, which is the fear center of the brain, is responding to the autonomic nervous system that gets triggered into fight or flight, because it says danger, danger. And so, we develop ways of coping when other people hurt us that can create patterns in our lives, I guess. So, a lot of trauma bonded people might have become codependent. They may not have started as codependent, but, because of their experiences, they can often develop an unhealthy attachment style because they're feeling insecure. They might feel misunderstood, and they haven't really learnt what healthy trust is. They might also be rescuers because perhaps they grew up with an alcoholic parent or somebody who was very needy, and they learnt to feel important and valued by taking care of others. So it's sort of become the only way they know how to connect or to feel worthwhile. Sufferers of trauma bond are also usually highly empathetic. I mean, they feel what the other person feels to an extent that it can cause them to become enmeshed, which means due to a lack of adequate interpersonal boundaries, over time they increasingly see themselves only as an extension of the other person. And that leads to low self-esteem because, it eats away at their sense of who am I. Victims will often stay stuck in trauma bond because they believe they have nowhere else to go. They might fear being alone. They might be convinced no one else would ever want them or believe them. And having placed their sense of self-worth in the hands of others, they really start to live in double-mindedness. Their minds start racing wildly because they're denying their own needs and their intuition, which comes back to that connection to the truth you were talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. So it's something that it's formed in us. It unfolds. It's not something that we inherently are anyway.
Yeah.
But it's easy to believe that, right, Rhonda? When
Yeah.
we are in situations like that, it was definitely my case.
Yeah.
And
It's
even to
really
this
also
day,
a symptom of a lack of assertiveness skills. Maybe we've never been taught to negotiate, and, our determination and resilience gets broken down by that pattern of abuse.
right? Gosh, and I remember that for me it was really a challenge to create boundaries, to say no
Yes.
and stand on my own with that no really firmly. And then if I did, I would feel guilty after.
Yeah.
And it's still something that I'm working on, which is interesting too.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like the more I give attention to the mind with the patterns that has been created, because it seems like that's the kind of relationship that I still have with my husband, my current husband.
Yep.
Which is fascinating. They're still there, those patterns, but I'm aware of them. So it's easier now to just not to ignore, but just let them come and go, those thoughts. And if I say no, and then guilt, the mind tries to make me guilt, then I just kind of I just let it talk in a way by itself. And I try not to fight the mind. That's one of the things that I noticed, that it's once these patterns are created, it's really interesting how it tends to rebel if you don't if you don't act upon those patterns anymore.
Yeah.
It feels like it rebels against you or tries to. Like in my case, I do a lot of meditation, and I learned to just let it be and not to give attention to it. I know there are methods, because I talk to a lot of therapists and so many amazing people with so many healing methods.
Yep.
And I know there are some of them that are supposed to, the goal is to replace or to completely erase those patterns. Is that possible, really, Rhonda?
Well, it is. It is possible, but not through our own effort. And this is the thing, we get sucked into trying harder, to to believing that we can do it. But the science actually proves that the thoughts that we resist are the ones that persist and grow stronger.
Right.
I think a real misconception of trauma bond is that people are weak-willed, but in fact, willpower is a symptom. It's not a cause of trauma bond.
Right.
Trauma bonded people actually tend to be strong-willed, resilient, and loyal people, and they don't give up easily on love. But due to adrenal fatigue and brain fog and all those other myriad of physiological manifestations of stress, breaking free of that sort of addiction isn't simply about increasing motivation to change. Rather, it's about healing a discouraged heart and fearful mind to clear the trauma that's held somatically in the body's central nervous system. Yeah?
Yeah.
And
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, there are steps. Would you like me to sort of walk you through?
Yes, please. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So, without God's love as the source of a person's fundamental emotional need for safety, significance, innocence, and purpose, that person must seek to heal themselves. But how do you go about it? Well, first, let's consider a person's sense of safety, which is stored in the mind body. The trauma-bonded person must learn to self-regulate their nervous system, and that means to prioritize their physical health and safety. The first priority has got to be to shift the victim's focus away from the abuser to build a safe environment where they can focus on rebalancing their body and reducing the stress. The natural support for your nervous and digestive system often gets overlooked. You may need to see somebody to get support in terms of a healthy diet, avoiding adrenal stimulants like caffeine and alcohol. Maybe you might need some supplements that could help your nervous system. Right. And getting control of your nervous system, because once the nervous system kicks in with anxiety, your brain's going to start getting onto a hamster wheel where you're going to start ruminating. And in order to be able to get control of that, it's a difficult thing. Okay. So you can consciously, the only way a person can consciously do that is through correct diaphragmatic breathing. But that's not always possible when you get triggered, is it?
No.
Yeah. Especially for a person who's become disassociated from their feelings. Yeah. Now, my personal experience of having tried everything else that I've just mentioned will seem counterintuitive to most people. However, what helped me was, as you say, accepting my situation in the present moment, letting go of the things I can't control. And instead, when I placed my trust fully in God's word, I experienced that faith calmed my nervous system and settled that amygdala fear center of my brain. But let me sum that up. It's faith combined with trust that casts out fear and calms the nervous system, not faith alone. Remember, even the demons believed. The result of faith plus trust for me was inner peace beyond anything I'd ever actually experienced, even though I was still going through and navigating storms in my life. So here's the thing. You can't truly trust Christ unless you actually know him. And the way to do that is to develop a personal relationship by reading the Bible, because God will speak to each person's soul individually through his living word. That's how it gets to us. But if you're not a follower of Christ, the next step is to try and restore your sense of significance, innocence, and purpose. And for a trauma-bonded person to have to give up someone who was once the love of their life, something's got to give. And it's literally that part of your soul that belongs to the narcissist that has to die. And that will create a fear of losing their own self-identity, really. And unfortunately, many would rather go through hell than become somebody they aren't at the moment. So, it takes opposing your cravings for the other person or the object of your desire in order to be able to do that. And it's one of the hardest things you'll ever have to do, because you're going to go against all your emotions and your instincts. So to start doing that, you have to confront the inconvenient truth. I can give you a few steps here. The first one is to stop trusting the narcissist. It's realization that holding on to this false idol is never going to bring you the happiness you want. To trust the untrustworthy isn't love. It's actually an act of fear or denial that you will be let down. Why are we continuing to trust a person who hasn't even earned it, and neither do they want to earn it? The next thing is to take stock of the damage. Consider the consequences, not only to yourself, but also on those people who rely on you if you don't face your unbearable feelings. And it does come down to unbearable feelings, because your mind needs to become fully persuaded that you're better off without than with that person by remembering the consequences at the same moment that temptation to go back to them hits. So the process is about teaching your own mind how to comfort and reassure yourself, like you said you were doing. And to do that, you need to weed out the lies that the abuser would have you believe about yourself or about the situation, and replace them with the truth. Now, remember, life is like a garden. The lies are like weeds. They'll always come up. But in order to grow anything beautiful, you have to plant it, water it, and continually nurture your relationship to the truth. So,
what can I say? It just makes this is it. I might use different words. To me, it's faith. It became surrender more than for some reason. It's just words that we are using anyway. I think the feeling is the same. The result is the same. What you said is so true, like regulation of the nervous system. That's exactly what happened to me. Like the more I give my attention to love, which comes from the divine and has to do with the infinite, the limitless, then fear dissipates. It just dissolves. And I give less attention to fear anyway, or anyone, anything that has that type of energy.
Yeah.
So that makes so much sense. And another thing that you said that's really a tough one for most people is kind of also bringing the attention or giving ourselves now to something that's not an object, which is God. It's not an object, because we are used to, right, to believe and almost like have this devotional attitude towards objects, people and things and places. So now, just giving our attention, giving our being back actually to the divine, then something happens. And that's hard to explain, Rhonda. It's so true. But to me, it feels much more real than anything else.
Absolutely. And, like we mentioned, we all have an innate need to not only feel love, but to be able to give and receive love. So a person needs to live beyond, they need a reason to live beyond their own existence. The trauma-bonded person needs to fill the void that's left by the abuser. I mean, it's like changing the locks so the squatters can't come back in. And let's face it, without someone to love, your enthusiasm to break the bonds either to a person or to a thing may wane. So we need to fill the void by living for a higher purpose. I mean, do you plan to worship yourself instead? Or could loving God be a safer solution? I mean, if Christ is already your someone, do his expectations encourage you or condemn you?
Yes. That's part of the book that you wrote. The one section is called Fill the Void, right?
Yes,
and then live for a higher purpose. Exactly that's it. Yeah. So by giving ourselves to the divine, to God, surrendering to it, it feels that way. Like now we're being guided to do things that benefit everyone. And that's interesting. That's more focus on love again. So it's always benefiting this body, mind, and then perhaps the family, people around me, of course, and then the community, and then who knows, maybe humanity at large.
Yeah.
There's something about that I almost see the idea of God as, like parents, the way they guard their children, the way they have so much love and connection and bond, almost like a attachment type of thing. But when I think about God, when I look at that parent and I think about God at the same time, it's almost like, it's something very powerful that happens that I try to explain with words. I think I never tried it before. I'm trying now to put words to it. It's almost like when I look at a parent, like you as a mother, I look at your child. It's almost like there's no separation between you and a child. Yeah. What if I'm kind to your child, I'm being kind to you. And I think that's the way I see now. If I'm kind and if I'm loving towards everything, all other human beings and non-human beings and the environment, it's like pleasing God. It's like honoring God.
Absolutely.
I don't know if that came to you. Yeah.
Yeah, God is love, and that's it. Often I think that what we need to do, I've really started realizing the power of words, that having a thought that is negative alone is natural. It's always going to occur. It's just that we have to learn to capture those negative thoughts before giving any effect to them in words. Yeah. If we don't, because the words have the power either to build up or to break down. And that is why the Word of God literally tells us, it's a living word that we can use his words. We can grow and become more like him. He is literally like the guide. The person lost in the bush must freely submit his will to the guide in order to be able to move out of the forest where he's lost.
Right.
But unless he submits his will freely,
Right.
he's not going to be able to follow and hear what the guide is saying. So really, the Spirit empowers, it's our guide. And when we listen to it, it's the source of our love and a truth. It's our teacher, but it also empowers us. And I think it's the empowerment that Christ gives us that is the main difference here. The crucial difference is when we rely on other humans or ourselves to put into practice, what mental health practitioners would call acceptance and commitment therapy. Yeah. You might get the results that you want, but the difference is it's not permanently sustainable. And I've experienced that in my own life when I've thought, well, I got myself out of that hole. I'm thriving. But the minute you lose it, it's extremely hard to get it back. But when you place your trust in God to help you, every cell in your body, your hormones, your nervous system, your digestion and immune systems, as well as your soul, respond positively to that light. It's because it's like plugging into the mainframe of the power grid, the source of life itself. When we try on our own behalf or someone else, it's like plugging into a PowerPoint in the wall, not to the mainframe. And the reason is, God is the only one who can fill our love cup of our hearts. And, our love cups, as you mentioned, they have to be full to overflowing inside of us before we can actually then pour into others. And, our desire for things that will erode the spirit begins to fade, things like the ego and self-gratification, because they actually bring about a type of darkness that can't actually exist where the light of love lives.
Yes, a billion times to that truth. Gosh. And, I know you specialize in narcissistic abuse. Is that something that's required for people who are willing to heal, to believe in God, or it's not required and you can still guide them through this beautiful movement?
Absolutely. It's a free choice. I'm not a healer. I don't consider myself a healer. I'm a facilitator, and I am, a practitioner who guides. But the choice is always the individual's. I have people that come to me that are non-Christians, and I say to them, look, that's what you need to do. If you want to get out of this mental loop that is keeping you in overwhelm, then you need to learn to accept and push through the short-term discomfort by keeping the long-term benefits and your goals in mind. And it's not always easy to do that because the default moods become part of their identity. But really, if they can just write down, what are my moral values? What are the truths that I'm going to live by? And then follow those and use those as their guide to help them make choices, either to move towards or recognize that actually this choice is going to move me away from my goals. Then, they are doing and likely to make the best decisions for them. Whether or not somebody believes in Christ or not is actually of no concern to me, because I've realized, I'm not a savior. It comes from within. Each person has free choice. And sometimes, like my own free choice and going against what my neighbors were trying to convince me of, it had to be a change of heart. It's not a change of mind. It wasn't until actually one of my work colleagues passed away. He was a great Christian, and I went to his funeral that I actually felt God saying, what, I'm drawing you near. I want you to change churches and go to this other church, because I'd been at the Catholic Church. And what happened personally, my personal experience was when I went, and this time in my life, I was thinking about suicide. I was just so broken in myself that when I went, I couldn't stop crying. The worship music and the sermon, it felt like every single week God was directing it straight at me. And the reason that is because it doesn't matter when you were born in history, whether you're born in the 1st century, whether you're born in this century, whether you're born in Africa or America or New Zealand, male or female, or what religion you are, Satan always works on an individual in the same 4 ways. He uses the wiring of our bodies, our autonomic nervous system, to create a sense of, attack our sense of safety. He attacks our sense of significance. He will attack our sense of innocence, because Satan wants to hold the power of guilt and shame over you.
Right.
And the last one is the sense of purpose, because, of course, we all need a reason for getting up in the morning, and we all want to feel that our life has value and meaning. And so, the modern mental health techniques like acceptance and commitment therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy, RTT, there's so many. They can help everything, except the one thing they will never be able to do is to restore a person's sense of innocence. Because a person who's condemned by Satan will always wrestle with their guilt and shame. It's only by actually honestly accepting that Christ died on the cross for us, and in doing so covered our sins, that our sins are taken away and they no longer have any power over us, because God has said, I've interceded for you. And that's where the real power comes. When you believe that, you can actually say, you know what, I don't care what other people think of me or might be saying about me. I am living now for an audience of one. My eyes are lifted up to the heavens. I'm not allowing myself to be judged by others. He's become my shield. And even though people's words may still hurt us, or their actions, it doesn't pierce the heart and create those inner soul wounds like it would have, because you can cast it down with the truth. You can say, actually, I'm holding on to what God says I am. He says I'm lovingly and perfectly made, and I'm going to believe that over what other flawed individuals will say. And at the same time, I'm also going to I recognize in my own self that I'm flawed. And so I'm going to continue doing my own work to try and be a better person.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's another beautiful commitment, isn't it? To just always being open.
Yeah.
Yes, to everything you said. So it's believe it's not needed in a way, because it's this transmission, as you said. You can feel it in the body. You don't
it's
have
a transformation by the renewing of your mind. The problem with narcissists, somebody who truly has narcissistic personality disorder, is that either they cannot see their own faults because, they are just so full of their own ego and their own will, self-will. They're following and driven purely by their own self-will. So they do not see it. They think everyone else is to blame, therefore it can't possibly be them. Or they've experienced a lot of early childhood trauma or adverse events in their life where they feel too consumed by guilt and shame, they can't go there. It will overwhelm them. They can't face them up to it. Right. Or they may feel it's all in the subconscious brain, because sometimes when our emotions are too overwhelming, the brain will put it into the subconscious. I've had an experience of that myself. And so that may take something like Brainspotting, which is very effective modality for helping people open up the brain-body access through the visual point in the eyes, because they've discovered that the eyes literally are the windows to your soul.
Yeah. Is that a new healing method, Rhonda? Brainspotting?
Well, I mean, relatively it's new, but it has been actually around in the US for, I understand, around 20 years.
Right.
A New York practitioner, a New York psychologist called David Grand, had been working with an Olympic figure ice skater for, I understand, around 10 months to try and resolve some issues she'd had. But her main thing was she wanted to master a turn that was much more simple than some really difficult ones she could do, and she just couldn't do it. So he was using EMDR. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
And for 10 months, they weren't getting anywhere. But what he noticed is whenever her eyes were in this certain position in her visual field, her eyes would wobble. And so he thought, I wonder what will happen if I just hold my finger or a pointer on that spot. What happened was that for 10 minutes, all this past trauma she hadn't consciously been able to recognize or aware of came up. Now, every emotion needs a physical expression. By expressing either crying or laughing, we're actually releasing it. That's what our bodies are designed to do. But when trauma cuts us off from feeling our emotions because we're either denying them or pushing them down, or it's too overwhelming, so the brain's put it in subconscious, there's a disconnect. So that pathway, by finding the point in your visual field, if you picture a woman who's been beaten, and she always holds her arms above her head to the right of her brain, to ward off the blows. She could be 10 years out of that relationship. She knows she's safe. She understands that. But anytime her eyes still look up and to the right, she's going to feel triggered in her body because her nervous system is holding on to that. And so what they found is that by finding the point in the visual field, it's literally connecting the felt sense with the core wound. And when that comes back into conscious awareness, the brain then has neuroplasticity, and you can reprogram any misbeliefs, any false assumptions or fusions that might have occurred at that time with the truth from your adult brain, which is now going where it needs to go in order to finish processing that.
Right. Wow. That sounds amazing. And I think I asked the question because I interviewed just a few people, maybe one or two on Brainspotting, but lots of people on EMDR.
Yeah.
So it seems to be more popular, but Brainspotting is actually also something that has been, it's a method that has been around for a long time. 20 years. I don't know about EMDR, how long that has been around.
Oh, well, it's been around since they discovered it for the treating veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder. The thing about
has been around longer.
Yeah. The thing about Brainspotting, I think after the, was it the Columbine disaster, I want to say, there was a elementary school shooting somewhere in northwest the US. After 10 years of different practitioners going in there to help victims of that recover, and I'm talking about the school children, their siblings, their parents, the first responders, the teachers, there was a huge variety of people involved. They did a survey of all the different modalities to see which had the longer lasting and beneficial effects. And Brainspotting was number one. 59% of the respondents said Brainspotting lasted longer. Equine therapy was the second most, I guess, because there was a lot of children involved. Right. Yeah. And I've also, one of the first times I actually did it with a client who'd been sexually abused as a child, she came to me and she said, I've done EMDR, but I just feel like there's still some residual stuff I haven't been able to resolve. Right. We did it. Basically they focus on the pointer that you're holding in that particular point in their visual field around an issue. She hardly said anything for about 20 minutes. Her brain was just going where it needed to go. And at the end, I just noticed her shoulders relax and she let out a big, long sigh. And I said, I notice a change in you. Can you tell me what's happened? And she said, wow. She said, I feel whole for the first time in my life. And that was much gentler than EMDR. Right. And it's because when that brain-body axis connection is reopened, the brain has 200 billion neurons. It will instinctively go where it needs to go in order for you to finish processing what needs to come up and what needs to be processed. The problem and the difficulty we sometimes have as Brainspotting practitioners is when a person is really disconnected from their felt sense or from their body. And so it's a process of actually helping them learn to reconnect with that felt sense. And breath work, correct diaphragmatic breathing is the way, it's the path in. But also, if somebody says, well, I don't feel anything, it's, we can say, well, where are you feeling nothing? They'll just go, well, maybe all over. And how does that all over nothingness feel to you? Oh, I just feel numb. Where are you feeling that numbness? And they might say, it's actually feels like a tingling in my left shoulder or something like that. So that it sort of starts, and they start becoming and building awareness. And it's a process. It takes time, because a person didn't become trauma bonded or traumatized overnight. Right. The longer that they've suffered for, the longer it will generally take to find the way out.
Gosh. Yes. This is so clear to me. Yes. That it takes patience too, like commitment, patience to do the work. And that's beautiful to see a lot of people doing that too. I mean, I just love even hearing that news, that a lot of people just open to be healed these days.
Absolutely.
Gosh, I could talk to you forever, Rhonda. That's the truth.
Okay.
We are almost at the end of the conversation now. Yes. It has been wonderful. I want to mention your services. So your website is victoryoverwhelming.com. It will be clickable on the podcast notes. And your services are many: mental wellness and trauma recovery coaching, narcissistic abuse specialist, trauma informed Christian coaching, post-trauma growth. And you also offer a 15-minute discovery call, which is great too. Did I miss anything, Rhonda, on your services?
Yes. Well, I am a Brainspotting practitioner, certified Brainspotting practitioner. Yeah.
We just talked a lot about it. Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, I was under the impression that was infused within the other themes, but it stands on its own, right? Brainspotting.
Absolutely. And when I first learned about that as a Christian, I thought, oh, no, I can't do that. That's probably doesn't align. But the more I learned about it, the more I actually saw it's actually just the self-introspection that God calls each of us to do anyway. It's just, I'm really just a facilitator, helping the person, reconnect with their inner spirit through that.
Right. I love the way you say that too. Yes, the guide. I love the visualization, the way you talked earlier about the forest. If somebody's lost, then we need to surrender to the guide, right? The guide's knowledge to direct us back home. So yes. Let's see. I have an ending question for you. I usually ask these ending questions to everyone, so I'll ask you too. At this time, what do you feel is the world's greatest need collectively for all of us?
Definitely, as you pointed out, it's love. It's self-love, but not in an egotistical way, but just recognizing that we are all actually flawed. When a child is born, and they're born as a whole spirit with everything they need to thrive in life, the problem for a parent is, how do you discipline a child without killing their spirit or dampening their spirit? And what I'm seeing in the present situation of the world is that today, because we don't have the right skills as parents, because we are all carrying our own inner childhood wounds or relationship wounds, we are not bringing up our children with what they need to thrive. And the way society has gone, I don't know what it's like in America, but here, all these rules about not disciplining your child, God says, spare the rod and spoil the child. I'm not talking about unnecessary physical punishment. I'm talking about reasonable moderation, because it comes down to a thing called the uncertainty model. The more certain our brains are about reality, how people are going to treat us and what the truth is, the more we can connect to our inner sense of peace and feel joy. But the more uncertain we become about how someone's going to treat us, or how the world's going to pan out, or how events are going to unfold, it drives our brains from certainty into perception. And that's where we're at today. Everybody's got different rose-tinted or different tinted glasses on. They're all seeing the world through skewed lenses. And, we have to learn to take those glasses off and trust the original creator of our eyes, to see things as it really is. And it's about getting back to basics and the source of truth, which for me personally, it was the Bible that exposed all of Satan's lies. It told me who I really am. And when I started trusting in that, then things naturally started unfolding for the better in my life over a period of time, of course.
Yes, 1,000,000,000 times to that truth again. And returning to something that's very simple, right?
Yes.
Learning how to love again in a deeper way and unconditionally too. That would be amazing. I know, like you said, it's a process to get to that, but it's a beautiful one to be in. Thank you so much, Rhonda, for your presence in our reality, for this beautiful transmission and the promise of transformation, which to me is very real. It's more real now than any other time in my own life's history. So thank you for being you. Thank you for saying yes to the truth and to surrender to the faith in God. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Valeria, for having me on your show. What a beautiful person you are.
I love your presence too. So we'll be in touch again. Take good care of yourself, and we'll talk again in the future. Bye for now, Rhonda.
Goodbye.
Thank you for listening. To learn more about Rhonda Van De Geest and her work, please visit victoryoverwhelming.com.
To learn more about this podcast, please visit fitforjoy.org/podcast. Thank you again for listening, and bye for now.